right, so let's move on to the social justice warrior piece of this, because I spent the last week watching a ton of your videos. I had seen many of them before, and you just do a great job because you fearlessly put yourself out there. And as you've said repeatedly already, you're not representing anyone other than yourself, but you're talking about some serious stuff. You're talking about Islam and Black Lives Matter and feminism. These are pretty controversial things. So let's start with, well, first off, I guess, when did you realize what a problem the SJW, the social justice warrior stuff, had become? Was it directly related to the trans stuff, or had you seen those sort of themes because of all the world of Tumblr and the rest of it?
Well, right around the time that I was starting my channel, a lot of things were happening in the media. I don't know if you remember, there was someone named Stefani. They were like a trans ager. It was like a 45-year-old man who identified as like a 6-year-old girl.
Oh, yeah, I've seen some videos on that, yeah.
Yeah, complete degenerate. And the leftist media was pushing stories about it and, you know, talking about how it was brave and amazing. And I thought that was super disturbing. And then that was also around the time when New York started finding people for not using the right pronouns. And I was like, okay, these people, like I said earlier, are fighting wars that I did not ask them to fight. And I just wanted to, you know, speak my mind about it. And then, you know, there's also other components as well. I don't like how feminism and SJWs tend to completely ignore men's issues, which is one of the first topics I touched on my channel, and how they have all these, you know, apologetics when it comes to Islam. Just a lot of stuff.
Yeah, there is a lot of stuff. And it's all kind of tied together. So let's start with feminism, because you've been pretty outspoken against feminism, or at least what feminism has become. So can you lay that out for me?
Yeah, basically I have sort of an objection to the ideological framework in which feminism operates under, which places women as an entirely separate social class than men and places women in sort of a victim status, which I've been around strong women my entire life. I've never found this to be true, that women are some sort of damsels in distress, and I actually think it's kind of sexist to place them in that place. Mm-hmm. I also didn't like how feminism, you know, will virtue signal when they're confronted about men's issues and say they care about it, when they don't do anything tangible to actually help men's issues and help men. So those are really my main objections to feminism.
Right. So then you became a men's rights activist, and as someone that has transitioned and is a woman, this really flips a lot of things on its head, because people would think that you would be the reverse for some reason. I think that would be traditional thinking. But when did you realize that you wanted to become part of the men's rights movement? And actually, first, can you just describe what you think the men's right activism, what is it really? Because I think a lot of people don't know.
Yeah. Well, first of all, when I started my channel, I definitely, you know, waved the MRA flag, you know, men's rights activist flag. I've kind of stepped away from calling myself that, because I feel like sometimes when I label myself, or when anyone labels themselves, they sort of fall into the trap of confirmation bias, and I don't want to feel like I have any sort of alliance with any sort of groups. I just take each issue individually and digest it and make my opinion, form my opinion. But I definitely do care about men's issues, and I still talk about them on my channel. It's close to home because I have a half brother who has been to jail for domestic violence, and his wife had no scratches on her. She completely lied about it, and she was able to get him arrested just on claims. I also care a lot about inequities in divorce court, family courts, male suicide. I don't like the stigma around male victims of rape and molestation. It's kind of a lot of things. There's a huge crisis in education for men and boys. They're falling behind. There really is a lot of issues, and like I said, feminism just doesn't even touch on them. They claim to, but they don't.
Right. So I think that sort of conventional thinking on this is that men have kind of been in charge of the world for so long that even if some of those issues that you just mentioned are true, you know, claims and divorces and jail and this and that I sense that there's a certain amount of people with leftist thinking and some of these social justice warriors that would just say, well, you know what, suck it up, man. Your time is over. Now, obviously, that's not saying I subscribe to, but do you think that's where it's coming from with them?
Yeah, but I mean, I think that line of thinking is super dumb. I mean, I think that there's the past and there's the present, and things change, and people have to change with it. We have to realize that there are issues that face men now that they didn't face yesterday, and kind of move forward with it. Because at the end of the day, the pendulum did swing too far, and we're kind of still in this state of trying to convince people that the pendulum swung too far.
Yeah, I would imagine that out of all the things that you talk about, that this is probably the one you would get the most hate for, and we're going to get into some of the other ones in a sec. But do you think that's fair to say?
No, I think by far the biggest one that I've gotten blowback from was Black Lives Matter.
Ah, really? So not even Islam. So all right, let's shift to Islam for a second. So you just did a video that I watched where basically you said that being an Islamophobe is not a bad thing, and then you laid out a case for that. So can you kind of break down that video, and then we'll link to it below so people can get to it.
Yeah, I mean, my question would be like, I'm transgender, why would I not be afraid of Islam? I mean, like I said in the video, the implication behind the word Islamophobia is that somehow it's irrational to fear Islam, which is an ideology that calls for my brutal death. I'm not sure why I wouldn't be afraid of that. I mean, I would not be able to exist peacefully in a Middle Eastern country under Islamic law. Really, I can only exist in Western society where people feel how they want to feel about trans people. There's definitely people who wouldn't like me solely for that reason, but there is a general consensus that I have a right to live my life as I see fit if I'm not hurting anyone else. And that is what allows me to be here.
Right. So when you're talking about this, you definitely, to me, are making the distinction, which I always try to make, between Islam, which is just a set of ideas that can be criticized like any other set of ideas, and people who live as Muslims. And there are plenty of Muslim people who, as individuals, would certainly not care or want to harm you in any way, or who might fall in love with you or anything else, or who could be your biggest fans. But you're saying that where the rules of Islam are in place, this is something that it is legitimate to fear. It is not phobic to fear. You're not prejudging. You're post-judging.
Yeah, anywhere that Islam is codified into law is a horrible place to live in terms of human rights. I mean, that's just an objective truth. Like, obviously there are exceptions, but even in those exceptions, it's just not up to par with the freedoms that you can have in Western society. Obviously, I've met many, many Muslims who are perfectly fine, no issue. The thing is, I think you and I agree on this, like, it's important to separate people from ideas. It's not, that you hate Muslims because you're criticizing Islam. It's just the idea of Islam, not the person who follows it.
I mean, look, I always say, it's like, I would only judge people on their individual feelings. You know what I mean? If you're trying to behead me, or if you're trying to subjugate women, then I have a problem with you. But if you privately believe whatever you want to believe, whether it's in Muhammad or Moses or the spaghetti monster or Jesus or who else is there? It's probably a couple other good ones, right?
Yeah, but that's the difference between us and SJWs. They're the thought police, like, it's not enough for people to, accept trans people, like, in their own hearts or whatever. You have to actively show it. And you know what I mean? Like, it's like everyone has to be an activist or you're part of the problem. That really is the difference, Yeah,
it's funny. I saw on Real Time a couple of weeks ago, Bill Maher did an interesting piece about the left, and he was saying, you guys are always finding little dirt in a room that you demand to sweep up. Meanwhile, the whole building's burning down. And I think that's really what you're describing. It's like you have all these people who their general ideology is pretty much the same, but they're finding little ways to fight with each other as there's actual issues that we're completely ignoring in terms of, for all the trans people or LGBT people or women or other minorities that are in all of these places that are ruled by Islam. It's horrible for all of them, but I don't see anyone on the left doing anything about that.
No, absolutely. And it's just like you touched on. I mean, it's not enough to accept trans people and, not discriminate against them. If you accidentally misgender them, you're automatically a transphobe. And they constantly, I mean, it's in the word of what they describe, microaggressions. Right. It's literally microscopic. You have to search for it to find it. If you have to search for it, it's not a problem.
Yeah. So wait, let's jump into the microaggression thing and trigger warnings and safe spaces and all that stuff. Okay. So I know you're as against them as I am, but as someone that's younger than me, when did you see this actually starting? Like, when you were in high school, was this concept bubbling up there? Because when I was in high school, it did not exist at all.
No, I'm really young, and I didn't even see it in high school. I saw it when I got to college. That was when I started seeing it. I started seeing, it was like everyone at my school had to be liberal, social justice warrior, or you were kind of blacklisted. And it was kind of like, that's that person, and we're woke, and we're, constantly virtue signaling, and we're great people. That's kind of what it was. I saw a lot of bias in college classrooms, and I think it spawns in college more than high school, but yeah.
Yeah. So what do you make of, going back to Islam for just a sec, that Islam seems to have been put at the top of this oppression Olympics that we talk about all the time? So trans is high on there, but it's actually lower than Islam. To me, the SJW people, the regressive people, all this, their highest place in the oppression Olympics is Islam, which actually is the most regressive and against progressive ideals of all of these ideologies. So what is going on in their well-intentioned brains?
Absolutely. Nothing trumps Islam on the oppression Olympics. It's really crazy how they really are, like you said, completely on the opposite end of what they believe in on pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And I genuinely don't understand it. Like, I've talked about this before, like, why is it? I think it's simply because they are dumb enough to conflate Islam with brown people, and they protect brown people at all costs. I think that's what it is. I think it's that simple. They're brown, so they win.
Which is not only, there's actually a degree of racism related to that, but it's also, it's terribly sloppy thinking, because guess what? There are brown Christians, and there are brown Jews, and there are brown atheists, and everything else. So they're attaching an ideology to a racial connotation, which is silly and nonsensical. And one of the things I saw, the Olympics is happening right now, and our friend Lalo tweeted out he retweeted a picture that some writer had posted, and I believe it was a woman from Iran and a woman from America in beach volleyball. And the American woman, I think it was an American woman, she's just in a bikini as always, well tanned, great body bikini. And the Iranian woman was in, the hijab and the whole thing. And the guy wrote something to the effect of, "There's nothing wrong with this." And Lalo wrote something like, well, actually, one culture is forcing women to do that. And I thought, this just, to me, is the perfect example of the virtue signal, that I don't have a problem in and of itself with this woman wearing that stuff, but it has to be purely her decision to do so, and she has to be just as free to wear the bikini. So that American woman could wear a hijab and cover up completely, but she has the choice to do either, and it's just not true that the other woman has purely the choice, even though in this specific case maybe she did, but I suspect not. And this is the crux of the problem. Do you think that's fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And people pretend like the hijab is, a choice over there, and it's just religious expression. No, they don't have a choice, and it's incredibly uncomfortable. I mean, I would imagine, I've never worn one, but I would imagine it gets fucking hot under there. Like, it's not as if, it's just a different culture. I think some cultures are objectively better than others.
Yeah, and I'm not saying you can't wear it, but it should be up to you. That's why it's always women that are put in these things, right? Like, that's true oppression, right? It's not women forcing men to wear weird things. It's always men forcing women. So doesn't that show you a little bit of the power play there?
Yeah, I mean, feminism is completely silent on, issues regarding women in the Middle East, which I think is insane. I think that the fact that's another one of my huge problems with feminism. They focus, like you said, on the small little corner in the room of the dirt, and they don't focus on what's actually happening, like we said, microaggressions, mansplaining, all this shit. And women in other countries are suffering. It's like they only focus on America, and we don't have that many problems here.
Yeah, not
at least in terms of women and, oppression of women. We don't really have anything wrong.
Yeah, not to say we can't get better at some things, but...
Absolutely.
So what did you make of, because to me the biggest example of what you're talking about was New Year's in Germany, when there was the mass sex attack and rapes, and they're still trying to figure out what happened, and the media kind of covered it up, but it obviously turned out to be a lot of the migrants and the new immigrants that have come from Syria, and actually they've come from all over the place, because it's very unclear where they're coming from because of some of the laws that Merkel's placed in terms of immigration. But immediately, I saw people on the left not defending women. They were actually throwing women under the bus, but immediately defending Islam. Now, we've already talked about, for whatever reason, they hold Islam at the highest, but isn't that the most anti-woman thing you could do? Women are our mothers and our sisters and our girlfriends and wives, and their immediate reaction was not to defend the people who had been attacked, but to defend an ideology that had led the attackers to doing it. I mean, it's just the most backwards thing you could do.
I mean, it's a sickness. It's this. I mean, I've read articles about, Swedish women who were raped and they don't tell the authorities because they know that the person who raped them was a migrant and they think that, they don't want to contribute to racism. I mean, it's a complete sickness. It's so wrong. I think that the idea, like we said, I think it's just the brown person thing. Right now, with everything Black Lives Matter in the media, everyone is rushing to defend brown people at all costs. And Islam, they happen to conflate that with brown people.